Hi and welcome to Aberystwyth Business School video lecture series Business Studies for Level 3. And welcome back if you have been following us in part 1 and part 2. We're now looking at part 3, which is analysing trends. So analysing trends is basically trying to answer this question of what does it all mean? Whether we've been analysing our primary data that we collected about our customers, or whether we're analysing the secondary desk-based research about your market, but also maybe Fentimans' business performance, there are a few key concepts to consider that are quite valuable, and those are extrapolation, correlation, and confidence intervals. So I'm going to talk to you. This video is a little shorter than the other two. I'm just going to talk to you in this video just about these three concepts here. So, extrapolation. What can the data that we have now tell us about a future state? So if we look at the sales figures for the last couple of years, can we see a trend that would be reasonable to maybe predict forward? So last couple of years, yep, okay, we're selling more and more and more and more. Is it reasonable for us to assume that that trajectory is going to continue? Well, quite often it will be. But the only kind of hiccup with extrapolation is that it doesn't account for unexpected changes. So we could possibly be looking at Fentimans sales figures over the last 5 years and see a very, very positive year-on-year growth. We can see a trend. So we know it's going to go up. But we're also able to pretty well feel that we're predicting and calculating by what degree it's going to go up. So is it going to just go up quite smoothly? Do we think it could go a bit sharper? Do we think it'll go a little bit slower? You know, how confident are we in how much growth we can anticipate is something we'll look at in a moment. But the hiccup with doing this kind of trend line is that it doesn't take into account a very unexpected changes. It's only ever looking at history and historical data. So our last 5 years' performance have shown a year-on-year growth in sales, absolutely no reason to expect why it won't continue to grow at that rate. And then we have something like COVID-19, which of course potentially the last thing on people's minds has been buying premium carbonated flavoured drinks and premium mixers. People haven't been going out to have picnics in the park. People haven't been going out to the proms. People haven't been having family barbecues and lots of people round. So it's reasonably safe to assume that their sales will have changed. I don't know by how much they may have gone down, but they certainly probably won't have gone up. So if they were extrapolating based on the last 5 years of year-on-year growth, it's not likely to be that good a prediction of a future state. But if nothing unexpected happens, absolutely. A trend line is a very valuable thing. Extrapolation is a very valuable approach, and most kind of 5-year business plans will be built on some form of extrapolation of saying, right, well, you know, if the market stays as it is, if we keep doing what we're doing now, maybe with a little bit more investment because we've understood that there's a correlation between things coming up in a minute, and actually we know that if we invest a little bit more here, we might actually get even more sales. That's all extrapolation and prediction on future state. So extrapolation is good, but it can have hiccups. There can be bumps in the road if there are lots of unforeseen, or not even lots, just any one unforeseen circumstance happens. So it might be a bit more reliable for Fentimans to predict or estimate future sales based on an association between things. For example, Fentimans may have noticed that a higher spend on advertising, the more money they spend on advertising in the media and stuff, leads to more product being sold. That feels like quite a logical relationship, doesn't it? If you do lots of advertising, brackets, as long as you understand your customer and you have targeted with the right appropriate messages that are resonating, because you understand what they value and what they're motivated by, if I spend more money advertising to customers, I should kind of sell more products. So they find a positive correlation. That's what it's known as when it helps. So if I spend more on advertising, I get more sales. It's a positive correlation. If I spent more on advertising and sales dropped, it would be a negative correlation. So I can now really start to predict sales based on how much I plan to spend on advertising. So if I look at my data and I say, well, okay, if I spend 1.2 million a year on advertising, I get X number of sales. And last year I spent 1.5 million on advertising and I got a little bit more sales. And the following year I got more. I'll start to see a pattern. I'll start to see this correlation, and I can actually statistically analyse to come up with a figure of how much that prediction is likely to be. So if I then say, well, there's a really strong correlation here. So what happens if we spend 2 million on advertising? We would sell that many more products. Let's do it. Let's make a marketing decision based on this forecast and based on this correlation and this relationship between the two things. So I'm going to get heavy into some knowledge and theory now about correlations, because I just think it's important that you understand what's going on in the background with them, okay? So correlation analysis is a measure of the direction, up or down, and the strength, how strong that relationship is between any two variables. So there's only ever two: price, advertising spend, and how many I've sold, number of days of dry weather and products sold. There'll be a strong relationship between two things. So first of all, you're looking for the direction of the relationship. Does one go up when the other goes up? Or down? But then also that strength. So it uses a standardized unit of measurement to better enable comparisons. So that first example I gave of advertising spend, well, that's measured in pounds, isn't it? Is correlated with how much I sell in units. Let's do it in sales. So let's say it's in sales value. So therefore, actually, I'm measuring I'm looking at a relationship between pounds against pounds. So that's quite easy. But if I was doing it against units sold, I'm now measuring one relationship in pounds and the other relationship in bottles. That doesn't feel quite so straightforward, does it? And then if I'm talking about days of sunshine and how many bottles I sell, one is a measurement of days and the other is a measurement of bottles. So you need to standardise. So the process of doing a correlation analysis, it uses an approach known as the Pearson product moment correlation to standardise everything as a unit. And it's looking at whether there is a positive or a negative correlation. It will always be a value of 1 or under. So anything up to +1 is positive, and anything down to -1 is negative. And it's looking for a perfect, well, it doesn't matter whether it's perfect or not. 1 is that it's perfect, perfectly positive or perfectly negative, plus or minus. But then this absolute value of R, this standardised figure, can also help to understand the strength. So we looked at positive and negative correlation. Does one go up when the other goes up or down? But we didn't really know how strong that relationship was, because it might go up, but it's a very weak association. So let's say the number of days, the number of advertising, and how much money we spend on advertising has a very strong, a 0.7 correlation with how much of that product we sell. So we could say that's a pretty strong correlation. I'm quite confident in making some predictions and some analysis and some forecasting and some investment based on that correlation, because that's pretty strong. Whereas although there's a positive correlation between the number of days sunshine and how many bottles we sell, actually the absolute value for R is only around 0.2. It's quite weak. So that relationship is quite weak. It's there is a relationship, but I wouldn't start getting too carried away with investing a lot of marketing spend in advertising all around the sunshine. You don't really want to be encouraging this association that people only drink Fentimans when the sun shines, when actually the correlation is quite weak. So direction is important. Does it go up? Does it go down? But even more important, how strong is that relationship? You might find that there's a negative correlation, but actually it's quite weak. So you're not really too worried about it. Even though when you do X, this happens, which isn't quite what you wanted, it goes down. it's quite a weak relationship. And so if strategically it's important for you to do that thing, then carry on doing it. So Fentimans know that if they spend X more on advertising, they should correlate it with a Y rise in sales revenue. And this is kind of how they know that. They plot it. So you'll see an X and a Y axis there, and you'll see lots and lots of little dots. And all of those little dots are how many bottles did I sell when I spent this much on advertising. How many bottles did I spend when I spent this much on advertising? How many bottles did I sell? And that starts to put together, and you even without that line there, if you kind of squint at it, you can see that those dots are going up. So that is an upwards, a positive correlation. And then if you squint at the bottom one, you can kind of see that even without that line, that those dots have got a downward pattern. They're a little bit more widespread, but they've got a downward pattern to them, and that's a negative correlation. So they've noticed maybe that if they put the price up, sales fall. So they're a premium product, they know that, they know they can charge quite a bit. The market report shows, doesn't it, because we saw that that market, people are spending more. So it's not necessarily units of sales are going up, they are going up, but people are spending more. They're more willing to pay a premium price. But that's possibly to a point. And maybe this graph with a negative correlation showed them that, okay, we went a little bit too far. We can put our price up, we can put our price up, if we put our price up to this point, actually we start to see a negative correlation and sales start to go down. Okay, so that just trying to illustrate to you what that looks like in a graph context, rather than the me waving my hands around context. So, important, correlation is not causation. If you've done any statistics, you will have heard that said to you over and over and over again. There is a relationship and there is a link, but it is not showing cause and effect. And the easiest way to think about this one, yes, more people drink Fentimans in sunny weather, but people drinking Fentimans doesn't cause the sun to come out. All right? So, yes, there is a correlation, a relationship between sunshine and picnics. There's probably more of a correlation between sunshine and picnics, and then picnics and Fentimans, maybe. But if I sit out, if it's raining now, which it isn't, but if I sit outside in the sunshine, no matter how much Fentimans I drink, the sun isn't going to come out. There's not a cause and effect. In the same way, no matter how many picnics I have, I won't cause the sun to come out, even though there is a relationship between sunshine and picnics. Okay, and the final point is around confidence intervals. So the final concept to look at in this session is confidence intervals. When we do research and we have found something interesting or we're making any predictions, we need to express how confident we are in our findings, particularly if somebody's going to be using those to make some important business decisions or some marketing investment and any kind of predictive use of our findings. We want to know how confident we are. So to do this, we show our analysis with a thing called a confidence interval, and it's actually a range. We're going to have a look at an example in a moment. And so the more precise that a prediction or a concept might be in research, the less confident we're likely to be in it. So if you imagine a goal, and I've got a football, and the goal is 20 feet wide, I can feel probably 95% confident that, all being well, I'm going to be able to kick the football into the goal. And every time that goal gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, or closer together should I say, my confidence is going to reduce. And so maybe when the goal mouth is only 2 or 3 foot wide, my confidence of being able to score a goal has maybe reduced to 50%, or probably quite a bit less than that. So think of it about your confidence within a range, and if a range is really big, you can feel quite confident that your value is going to fall within that. So just to illustrate that, a very homemade graph here. It's all about range. So we've got there the annual sales, that's that wiggly blue line there, pretty good trend upwards. And if I was to say, well, I'm kind of extrapolating from that line, and I feel quite confident in predicting that we're going to, best case 55 million sales, worst case 35 million. We're going to be somewhere between 35 million and 55 million in sales next year. That's a very wide range, that's a very wide goal. So I can be quite 95% confident that our sales figures next year are likely to fall within that range, can't I? We said about extrapolation not really being able to detect changes and unexpected things. So COVID-19, these are actual sales figures, and so these are based on the sales figures from the Fentimans forecast. So therefore, if we go and have a little look at how the sales are doing when the next annual report is published, so the period that covers the sales that would have been happening now, I appreciate it's probably a year or two down the line. It'd be very interesting to see what did happen. But COVID-19 and pandemics aside, I can be 95% confident that our sales forecast for next year is going to be somewhere within the region of 35 million and 55 million, remembering that it was around 40 million this year. So as I narrow, so ignore the two dark blue ones and now look at the 70% range there, and maybe that's sort of saying 48% to 39%. I can be 70% confident that our sales figure is going to fall within that range. And then if you look at that 50% bit there, let's say that sales figure's between 42 million and 43 million. That's getting really quite specific now, and I'm likely to be a lot less confident that our sales figures will fall within that range. It's that very narrow goal when I was shooting that football. All right, it's got narrower and narrower, and I'm now a little less confident. So 95% confident we're going to be somewhere in that region, and the more and more and more precise and specific I get with my number, the less confident I start to get with it. Okay, good stuff. So the activity for this session is going to have you looking at correlations, and all I want you to do is to just think of some other factors that may have a positive or negative effect on how many soft drinks Fentimans sell. So in our examples earlier on, we were talking about the sunshine, how much we spend on advertising, how many people go to picnics and things. Those are factors that might be shown to have a statistical relationship. But what I'd like you to do is to just think of some others, and particularly positive. Negative. We were looking at positive things, positive correlations. The sun comes out, people drink more Fentimans. The national income goes up, people buy more Fentimans, they've got more money. So maybe have a think about what is likely to be some negative correlations. But that is the end of session 3, looking at analysing trends, and we're now going to move on to part 4, elasticity of demand. So I shall see you in a bit.